Matthew chapter 5. So we're doing Matthew 5 through 8, 11 and 12, Luke 7, 8, 11, and John 5. But we're going to take more time going through Matthew, and then because Luke repeats a lot of what Matthew said, so we'll focus in on Luke, what wasn't written in Matthew, instead of focusing on the differences between the two because they're pretty minimal. But and then John 5 is different from what we're finding in these guys. So Matthew chapter 5, one of the coolest chapters I think in Scripture. I mean, obviously all of Scripture is good, and I feel like anytime I read something, the day and the season that I'm in, changes the impact. But Matthew 5 is just a forever awesome passage. The blessed are. And let me just read through this real quick. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the gentle, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is in heaven. For your reward in heaven is great. What makes greatness? If you were to stop on the street in front of Costco and to say, what are attributes of greatness? The vast majority of people are going to say nothing from this list. Because what we're told and what we're given of greatness, is usually pretty self-gratifying or self-promoting or and it's so interesting to me that poor in spirit, mourn, gentle, hunger and thirst for righteousness. I mean, there's so much. It's just other. It's other. And then what in reverse of that too, if you do great, if you're asked that same group of people, if you're great, what should you get in return? The answers that are given of what you inherit because of that greatness, again, you probably wouldn't find on this list. But the kingdom of heaven, the comfort of God, satisfied, mercy, see God, called the sons of God, the kingdom of heaven. It's so other, and I find it's easy, and I imagine maybe some of you have wrestled with this too, to try to take the definitions of greatness and the rewards of the world and shove them into Christianity or shove them into faith, a life of faith. And man, it twists pretty quick. And anyhow, I just think it's a pretty awesome list here, a pretty amazing thing that Jesus is setting a tone and a perspective that's pretty other. And then it's no surprise that the verses that immediately follow is, hey, this is really different than the world, and you're to be like salt to the world because of how different you are and I am in you. You're to be like light in the world. Those things that people call greatness and rewards worth having is actually darkness, is actually lifeless, and you're of this other to be the ones that shine and that bring flavor to the world, that you're a light on a lampstand. Just powerful how much, how different he is, and how that's good, and how it's not like if you humble yourself instead of like working yourself to death to move up the corporate ladder, God will give you the results of what you get at the top of the corporate ladder. It's not that. It's not like you do it his way and he'll give you what these people are going out. It's like everything's different. Everything's different. And that's why I think some of those gospel messages that we hear of, if you just give to the church, you'll be rich, instead of if you work hard, you'll be rich. It's not that. It's him. You'll have him. Especially those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. They'll be satisfied with what? Righteousness. Anyhow, it's just pretty cool. And then, kind of the next piece, and I was talking to somebody about this the other day. I find myself talking about this a lot, because sometimes when we're presented who Jesus was, it's this, like, everything's cool. Like, that was his message. Everything's fine. I love you. Everything's fine. And this kind of modern day, and a lot of people said, I think Lisa Bevere posted something where love, the definition of love has become, I accept and approve every choice and every life choice that everyone makes, and that's what love is, which is a perversion of love. But when he says, Jesus did say love, and he was radical love, so different from everything else, but Jesus didn't come and say everything's cool. Jesus came and said, look, as hard as you thought the law was, it's actually, I've called you to more than that. Has anybody seen any of the new Chosen episodes? I haven't seen 2 and 3, so don't ruin them for me, but I'll ruin episode 1 for you if you haven't seen any of them. But one of the things that Jesus says in episode 1, it won't ruin anything. He basically says, for those who don't follow me, I don't ask much of them. But to those who follow me, I ask a lot of them. And man, that's so true. That man, he's called us to a life, and the beauty of his message of, and that's really what the rest of Matthew 5. You heard don't murder, but I'm saying, if you're angry, it's the same thing. You've heard don't commit adultery. I'm saying if there's lust in your heart, it's the same thing. And so he raises the stakes, but then he raises the stakes followed by, and then he imparts his spirit into his people to live according to this greater way. And so just beautiful, beautiful. And so whenever you hear or are tempted to share or to receive a gospel that's like, just don't worry about it, man. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Like grace, mercy, grace, don't worry about it. That's not the message of Jesus. He didn't say that. He didn't say anything like that. Now, he met people who were really, really far from him. But then he met them, and everything changed. And then they got to walk in a way that was different. So it's not about holding the lost to the standard that he's held us to. It's to introduce Christ to the lost so that they, by the Spirit, can walk in the standard that he's called us to. Amen? All right, Matthew 6. It's really interesting that Matthew 6, really there's 3 sections at the beginning. And it's like kind of do good, pray, and fast. But all 3 of them, a theme that ties them together is while remaining unseen, or not in order to be seen. And so at the beginning, beware of practicing your righteousness before men to be noticed by them. Otherwise you have no reward with your Father who's in heaven. So when you give to the poor, don't sound a trumpet before you. I love this story. I don't know much about Rick Warren. I know he wrote a book that's really popular, and he's a pastor at a church in California, but I met someone who worked for him, and they said that, and he's a large church pastor and a pretty well-known guy, and a guy came to the church who was I think he worked in like the computer industry down in California, and so he's like super, super wealthy person. And he asked one of the leaders at the church, hey, I want to talk to Pastor Rick. I've got a check I want to give to the church. And he was like, yeah, you can give it. And, Pastor Rick's going to be so thankful, really appreciate it. He goes, no, this is a check I want to hand to him in person. And the staff member knew that this was the response. But basically the response was, this is the kingdom of God. Your giving doesn't earn you a place at a table. Like, Pastor Rick's not going to come see you. It doesn't matter what's on your check. And I just thought, man, like, it's so ugly that happened, but so good that, that even at that place, like, he had seen enough of this that he had instilled into his team, like, look, when people come to do this, they're sounding the trumpet on the way to giving, and that's not the heart of God. And so in this, that theme continues on. They have the reward. People know you gave. Cool. Like, that won't last you to the afternoon, much less have any kind of eternal impact. And then continuing on, when you pray, don't pray to be noticed. Don't pray so that people go, my God, what an amazing prayer. There it is. That's your reward. People thought your prayer was really cool. Awesome. I know it doesn't say this, but in the same way, don't lead worship so people go, wow, what an amazing musician. What a beautiful voice. Like that that was it. That was your reward. People think you have a good voice. Cool. But there's eternal impact when you give, like the widow's mite. It doesn't matter how much. It's the heart and what he'll do with it. There's amazing impact that happens when you pray. And it doesn't matter how big your words are or how educated or spiritual you sound when he partners with your prayer. Same with worship, of course, that there's power that happens in worship when it's unto him, and even if your voice or your instrumentation isn't, amazing, like he can do. So it's not about being seen, it's not about being known. And that language is really what takes us into the Lord's Prayer that, we just talked about here this last week. But our Father who's in heaven, holy is your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. And don't lead us into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And so, and then the kind of the twist or the continuation, the tying point after this is, again, a heart condition will produce life decisions. I've heard it said, if we focus more on who we be, then the overflow of that is what we do. But if we try really hard just to do without paying attention to the being, then we'll do, but probably with the wrong heart or with the wrong motivation or unto the wrong purpose. And so Jesus is really kind of pointing at, look, when you give, when you pray, when you worship, he doesn't specifically say this, but when you're doing these things, pay attention to what's your desire, what are you wanting to get from this? Because if it's recognition, there's something going on. He's getting to the heart of things. And again, I think that's why the Lord's Prayer is so important. Your name is holy. I want you. I want your way. I want your will. Help me. Help me to live in that place. And then he continues on into verse 14, if you forgive others for their transgressions. So now he's saying, look, if you're living this out, that's also an indicator of the heart. That when I'm giving, that's a good indication. If I'm giving because I'm thankful and because he deserves everything, and so I'm giving out of that overflow, then, man, that's awesome. That means the being is in a good spot, and so the doing is just a reflection of it. It's not what works my way into the being, it's the overflow of it. And so, and then from that, it kind of continues the conversation for fasting. So when you fast, don't walk around being like, oh, I'm so tired. Why? Oh, I'm extremely spiritual and fasting this week. And so, that's probably noticed how spiritual, how tired and hungry I am. And it's like, there it is. That's your reward. Everyone knows you fasted. You skipped a meal. Yay. Everyone knows. It says, in fact, he goes, wash your face, anoint your head, wash your face, so that people don't know. He's not saying people are going to notice. He's like go out of your way to conceal. Now, this isn't like if someone finds out you're fasting, you've sinned. This is not like if someone notices something and you talk about it. That's not the point here. It's not like if you tell anyone you broke it and the secret's over and you lost all spiritual power. It's not that. It's what's the heart. I'm fasting. Why? Unto him. I'm going without in order to make room, to give space to him. It's a spiritual, it's an amazing thing that God has created and given us in our life to walk in, and that's beautiful. But if it's to show that I'm doing spiritually impressive things, then that defeats the whole purpose. So doing all these things, do good, give, man, pray, man, fast, all of that, but not to be seen. Not to be noticed, not to give off an impression of some spiritual thing, but unto him. And then finally, he kind of says, the being on earth as it is in heaven. That's the your kingdom come, your will be done. It's what kingdom am I really paying attention to? What kingdom am I focused on? What kingdom has my attention? And so if it's the kingdom of heaven, then that's where I'm storing my treasures. That this prayer, and we know that Scripture talks about it in Revelation, the prayers of the saints, where's that fragrance right now? Heaven, before His throne. Man, like, let that sink in. So, person sitting next to me thinks I'm spiritual and no big words. Fragrance before the throne room of heaven. Like, what's better? Like, that's not even a hard question. So, having the right perspective, store up for yourselves then treasures in heaven. You know, I love all the stories. We're going to talk about one here in a minute, but where Jesus is like, dang, that's good faith. Like, dang, look at that generosity. Dang, like, look at this person's willingness to, like, that's, man, let's live like that. And when you look at those things, it's never an impressive religious thing. I mean, usually it's a quiet servant thing, or it's a great trust and faith in Him thing. And that's a different kind of thing. Verse 22, the eye is the lamp of the body, so then if your eye is clear, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light that is in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? You can't serve two masters. I've been thinking about this a lot, and God has actually brought this up to me a few times over the last few weeks in different moments of, the song, Open Up the Window, Let the Light In. I think it's such a great picture of that. It's like, man, open yourself up. Let light come in. Let the being, let the center of who we are, let the transformation, let the refreshing, let the perspective of heaven come into our life. Everything else will flow from that place. Everything else will come from that place. But you can't serve two masters. You can't from your own strength. I can't from my own strength try to be and to do great religious things where it's to serve some personal agenda to create something or to fill some hole of lack of worth belief that I have, or that's serving two masters. You serve the king or something else. Like that's kind of our options that we have available to us. And so let His light come in. You can't serve two masters. And then I love verse 25 through 34 is basically a whole bunch of words to say this. Don't let the stress, worry, or anxiety of today and tomorrow get you tied up. Trust He's for you. He's for you. He's with you. He's for you. He's for you. And I think sometimes always the enemy tries to come at us. And I think anxiety and stress and worry is one of those ways that, man, hell fights hard against. And I think that the way that our culture has been shaped, I think makes room for that to be a very easy thing. Different cultures, I think, are susceptible to different attacks from the enemy because cultures make way for certain sins, certain lies to make more sense. If you're in a culture or a place where it's really hard to find food and water, man, it'd be really easy for the enemy to come in and say, God doesn't care about you. He doesn't want to take care of your needs, right? And so in this culture, you have to do and be and look at this person's Instagram. Look, they're always smiling. Look at all of their pictures. They're always wearing makeup, and their family is always like sitting around a table laughing and playing a board game. And your piece of crap family, you just microwaved dinner and watched a movie together, and somebody screamed in the middle of it, So there's kind of always this pressure to look like something, to be like something, to achieve what someone else did, and people posting, my successful business. It's like, maybe that's true, and maybe that's a post that someone told you to write this on your, you know what I mean? There's just constant language being put out there where the world, or our world, is projecting, I'm here, I've done this, I've overcome this, I'm already here. And so then that puts a pressure on us. Man, I'm not there yet. I haven't done that. I haven't accomplished that. My life doesn't look like that. My body doesn't look like that. My family doesn't look like that. My mind doesn't have that. My skin doesn't have that, whatever. And so there's this pressure to be like something, to look like something, to achieve something. And so then hell can come in and be like, it's because you're not enough. It's because you haven't done enough. It's because there's something wrong with you. It's because, God's not, cared enough about you to help you, or that you don't care enough about him. And it just creates this twisting inside of us. And what's fascinating is you read, and I would really encourage you to go through and read this passage, but as you read through it, there's no steps. He talks about, the birds of the air, the flowers of the field, all he really talks about is his care for us. So as I wrestle with, and I have wrestled with, man, especially in the past, I wrestle a lot with anxiety and worry and those things. And it's funny because so many times the advice that I get from people is, man, if you just really dig into, there's truth. I should be in my word, sure. I'm not saying that. But this passage here, which specifically talks about being free of that, it's stare at him. Stare at him and consider his heart towards you. Because then the enemy can even come in and twist. Look, if you have anxiety, you got a faith problem. What's the Bible say about where he is in comparison to the brokenhearted? He's near. He's not rebuking you that your heart is broken. He's near you. He wants you to see, I'm for you. I'm here. See that grass? See how beautiful it is? It's grass. I'm taking care of it. But you, I made you in my image. But God, tomorrow, yeah, don't worry about tomorrow. But I have this list. Yeah, set your list down. Look at me. Look at my care for you. Look at my love for you. And again, when my treasures are in him and his kingdom and in his way, man, that's easy. But if I'm caught up and twisted with wanting to be something, wanting to achieve something, wanting to amass something, I have to set all of that stuff aside. I have to put all of those things away so that I can set my gaze on him. And so the cure is him, but the sickness is everything that's not him. But that's what this whole chapter is about. Being seen, what is that an indication of? I need to be seen. What's that an indication of? Insecurity. There's something in me that thinks until I'm seen, I'm not enough. What is that? A lie. How will I know that that's a lie? When I look at him. When I hear his voice and his thoughts and his heart towards me. And so, anyhow, it's just awesome. The goodness of God. Anything else before we jump to chapter 7?
I haven't thought about chapter 5.
Yeah, please.
I think so often, the students ask me, well, how come they don't have to do all of these things, or how come they don't? I'm they're not Christians. There's a difference. It's a club. They have chosen not to be in it. Not that they can't. Doors open. They just have looked at it and I don't want to do that. Yeah. And so don't expect people who aren't we don't expect people who are Christians. We expect it, but they don't. Everyone falls short, but you know what I'm saying? So it's
well, and a lot of times too, Jordan, I think when people ask those questions, and adults and kids too, it's why aren't they living up to the standard? And that's the focus. But even that's performance, right? So why am I having to perform when they don't have to perform? The honest answer is you don't.
Trying to perform is
What I need to do is die and surrender. And then he'll give me a new heart and a new mind. And then I'll live. And my being will be different. And so my doing will flow from that different. And so when people are caught up in the stress of their doing, it's usually, even if it's Christian doing, it's usually because that death has come and there's a lie that's come in that's made them believe that they have to perform in order to. But even that question, Because ultimately, what are we doing when we say, how come they don't have to? It's comparison, right? Where in our word does it say the spiritual gift of comparison, right? Whitney asked me to write a blog. I don't know when it's coming out, but that's what I wrote on, is comparison. Comparison produces really two things. One, the most common, I look at them and I think that they're better than me, that they've done more than me, they're more effective than me, they're more important than me, they're more liked than me, they're more successful than me, and so I feel bad about who I am and what I've done. That's the one and the most, probably 80% of the time when comparison happens, what the outcome of it is. Where's Jesus in that? Nowhere to be found. What's the other outcome? I think I'm better than them. I win. And so I look down on them because I'm better than them, I'm more successful than them, I'm smarter than them, I'm more capable than them. Where's Jesus in that? And so any Christian language that compares us to someone else is probably a perversion of Christian living. Yes, we're supposed to see fruit in each other, but seeing fruit in Tim is not my fruit compared to Tim's fruit. It's just, is there fruit? And that doesn't require any comparison. And so a lot of times when we get stuck in our Christianity, it's probably because there's something else that's made and weaved its way in. And so I'm thankful that you're there with those kids to point them to truth. And
perverted is that.
Yeah.
They're lost. They're going to hell.
Yeah.
And here we are. That's not fair. Like,
Yeah.
our minds are flipped.
Yeah.
What we should be focusing on.
Yeah.
Adults do that too, though, not just kids.
Oh,
where you
everybody
expect
does
Christian
it.
behavior from people who don't know Jesus. And it's like, that's silly. They don't know Jesus. They're not going to act like
Yeah.
someone who knows Jesus.
Well,
Yeah.
it's not even, like you
And
said,
your
it's not
point
even
of-
that you expect them, but you wish you could do it too. And it's like, there's something twisted going on in there.
Like, don't shortchange God. He can do it. He said he's going to. It says you can't. So yeah, the you who is like seeing it and is like upset. I mean, I think there's a point of like that inner, like, there's a thing that we should be and we're not that, and like that like very underlying, like, something's not right. I'm like, yes, something's not right, but you and me, like me, cannot make it there. There's no method by which you can get there other than saying, I can't do it, maybe I should let God do it. Because he says he can, and he's the only one who can, so believe him when he says it.
Amen. Andrew, were you stretching or did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I raised my hand. Like, I think even as we were talking about this passage in 2 Corinthians 11, it says that Paul's talking, he says, I'm jealous for you with a godly jealousy, for I betrothed you to one husband, so that to Christ I might present you as a pure virgin. But I'm afraid that the serpent deceived, I'm afraid as the serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, your minds will be led astray from the simplicity and purity of devotion to Christ. And the reason I got to that passage is that I think a lot of times when we start judging others or believers judge others, oftentimes it's because like we're judging ourselves in some capacity, and like and then it bothers us when we see others, whether it's much fruit or lack of fruit.
Yeah.
And it is that comparison that we're judging their fruit life compared to how we've judged ours.
Yeah.
And I think, that we see, and it's just so powerful, Paul saying that, bringing back that garden story, and we see how when they took of the fruit, they immediately, we've talked about this, frequently recently, but they saw themselves naked and they judged themselves and they hid in shame.
And what was the enticing to take the fruit? You'll be great.
Yeah.
What were they already? Great.
Right, and like that's the thing, and and like God is restored, like we've been given the gift of righteousness, and I think that's the remedy of judging of ourselves and others, is that it's been a gift, and oftentimes I'm still learning how to receive that gift, because oftentimes I see myself and I start judging myself because I don't see the fruit I want to see. But I'm asking, Lord, help me see how righteous I am, and how united I am with you. because I'll reign in life. Romans 5. I've been given the gift of righteousness and the abundance of grace. And it's, man, like when I see how right I am with God, like, and how one with Him I am, and unified with Him in death and resurrection, it's that whole abiding thing. I've been united with the vine. I'm going to bear fruit. But when I start judging myself, like I'm now putting my faith in not the righteousness that I've been given as a gift, but in what I do or in what others do. And I'm judging them unrighteous, or righteous anyway.
Yeah, and just like the
Does that
cure.
make sense?
Yeah, totally. But it's just like the cure to anxiety. Where's my cure in understanding my righteousness? Do I stare at myself or do I stare at Him?
You stare at Him and it's done.
And because if I want to know who I am, I shouldn't look at me, I should look at Him. Ask Him. I shouldn't listen to whatever voice, I should listen to His voice. Because then His voice tells me, this is who I am. This is who I've made you. I've made you righteous. I don't feel righteous. Cool.
Right.
I made you righteous.
And it's just
I don't feel justified. Well, then now you know what to call a liar. You're feeling, because you're justified. And so staring at Him, and it seems sneaky. Well, I'm only judging myself. It's not hurting anybody else. Oh, friend, I promise you. As I judge myself, I am hurting other people in a lot of different ways. But certainly in the one that you spoke to. Judgment of ourself leads to others, which is a perfect segue into Matthew chapter 7, our next chapter. Do not judge, first words coming out of the next chapter, so that you will not be judged.
Isn't that cool how that whole conversation leads to what Jesus talks about?
Yep. For in the way you judge, you'll be
He was talking
judged.
to people when he had this.
For in the way you judge, you'll be judged, and by the standard of measure, it'll be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, don't notice the log in your own? How do you say, let me help you with yours, when you got your own? You're a hypocrite. Deal with what's going on in you. And then he says, try, and you will accomplish. Work hard, and you will achieve.
Yeah.
Power through, and you'll get her done.
That'll preach.
He says, ask. Who are we asking? Ask. Who are we asking? Him. Knock. Who are we knocking to? Seek. Who are we seeking? He's not talking about like sales strategies. He's talking about Him. Stare at me. Look at me. Well, it's in a different book. We'll get to it later. But when we understand what's been given to us and what He's done for us, and we can rest in that and like really see that, man, it'll change our perspective, of worrying about what people see or don't see in us, and absolutely in how we see others as well. And basically, again, he just says, like, you guys, as parents and as people, generally speaking, you do nice things for each other. But you're like super wicked compared to me. And so ask, seek, knock, come to me, you'll find me. And I give really good gifts to my kids. And then the golden rule, verse 12. In everything, therefore, treat people the same way you want them to treat you. And then verse 13, kind of the caution. Enter through the narrow gate. For the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction. And there are many who enter through it. For the gate is small and the way is narrow that leads to life, and there are few who find it. But those in this room, you few who have found it, you're salt, you're light, and you're helping people. You're leaving the breadcrumbs, as it were, to the correct gate, to the smaller gate, to the narrow gate. And then again, a tree and its fruit. It's interesting. I know I've talked to you guys about this a number of times before, but the false prophets, false teachers, it's the Greek word pseudo. And pseudo means like you're putting on a facade, like you know that you're a twisted version of truth. False prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing. You see, even that picture, the reason why I think it's important, because I think many people have abused false teacher, false prophet passages to say if a person is wrong. If I get up here and I teach and I explain something wrong, or I quote the wrong verse, or if I reference something that is, disconnected or whatever. That doesn't make me a false teacher. It makes me a wrong teacher. I was wrong. That's okay. A wrong prophet. I believe God gave me something to share. I step out in faith to share it, and I missed it. That's a wrong prophet. It's not a false prophet. And so false prophets, wrong prophets aren't wearing sheep's clothing. A wolf who puts on a sheep's clothing isn't confused as to what they're doing. Right? They're like, I didn't even know I had sheep's clothes on. No, like that's intention. Like that's purpose. Your purpose is to be divisive. But listen to this. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You'll know them by their fruit. Grapes are not gathered from thorn bushes, figs from thistles. So every tree bears good fruit, but bad trees bear bad fruit. A good tree can't produce bad fruit, nor a bad tree produce good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So then, you'll know them by their fruits. Jordan.
So, I just had, it's not a contradiction, but just sort of like maybe I need to think of it more, but it came to mind to talk about. So, bad trees can't produce good fruit. True, right? Bad people can do things that appear good, and God works evil into good for those who...
Called according to his purpose, yeah.
So, like...
Well, let's read the next verse here.
Oh.
Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, did we not prophesy? Good, in your name. Did we not cast out demons? Good, in your name. Did we not perform miracles? Good. And I will declare to them, I never knew you. So yeah, people can do good things, but lasting good fruit and like real fruit, because Tim's talked about this a number of times. I think it's really important because even like the world's version of radical love it still falls short of the love of God. Yeah, I mean, and I mean it falls short in its power. It falls short in its purity. It falls short because again, the widow's mite. It was more. Why? Because it was financially a greater investment, or because some spiritual principle that's outside of the realm of natural. So it's not about the miraculous prayer, people saw you. That's it. Cool. That's what you get. And so there's good, then there's like good. And so I think that's where we can wrestle. Can bad trees produce like good fruit? Sure. But not good fruit.
Lowercase g.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Well, like, right now, I think
rotten on
this
the
is
inside.
really funny, but there's like these extravagant, like, will you go to prom with me? Will you marry me? Will you be my girlfriend? Like these extravagant, like crazy proposals and things, and like those don't make good marriages. Those aren't lasting love. Like those are just extravagant. Like what can this world even compare that someone would maybe fly across the world to see their loved one? Like, but that's not what we're called, like an extravagant act in the moment, but it's the continual acts, and it's the, like, sorry, this just made me think of love, but like the love that that only God can give is unconditional, and it's with you through everything, through every hardship. Like you can't fake unconditional. Like in this world, they don't, especially our culture, they don't really get a taste of unconditional love because of both divorce and breakup, and like there's so many reasons that, I think all we have are temporary extravagant acts.
And again, I think a lot of this is answered in, is it a doing that we're trying to accomplish, or is it a being that produces a doing? Because my radical Christian thing that I did,
Right.
from the heart, to self-serve, to prove that I am, to compare me to somebody else. Like the roots are bad. And the roots are what you really are, which takes us perfectly into the next part of this chapter. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine acts on them may be compared to a wise man who has built his house on the rocks. So what's your foundation? Because if my foundation is him, then like I can trust what comes from that place. I can, all that follows may be built slower than I want it to be, maybe built differently than I thought it should be. Maybe, maybe the picture isn't what I thought, but I can trust it. But the most beautiful building on sand will not remain beautiful. It won't last. So again, is it good or is it like good? All right, chapter 8. Now Jesus does some stuff.
That's the title of the chapter. Jesus does some stuff.
Yeah, that's my title. Comes down from the mountain after this beautiful message. I mean, isn't that a beautiful message? Like, all the blessed are those, look at me and let worry fall away. Man, don't judge people, but don't judge yourself. Don't try to do, focus on, who I've made you. And then he comes down off the mountain, and a leper, which is, I mean, maybe not quite, but it's basically like the equivalent of someone who, knowingly has COVID right now walking into a busy room, that like everyone runs, right? So leprosy is a lifelong disease, and it's a social, family, economic, in every way ruins your life. Plus, the disease itself is just horrific. I mean, you basically lose the feeling and the sense of, so you're banging yourself on stuff that you didn't feel, and then, it's awful. I mean, your fingers are coming off and toes and your face, and I mean, it's awful. It's an awful disease. And so Jesus comes off of this mountain, and one of those guys comes up to him. That's not insignificant. A leper came to him and bowed down before him and said, "Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean." Because that's it, right? That's the Old Testament word, spiritually unclean, physically unclean. It's like stay away, have nothing to do with. You can change me from outcast to accepted. You can change me from living in a cave where my family has to drop food 100 feet away from the cave entrance where I have to walk out and get it. And I pray to God my family continues to love me enough to bring me food, because the moment that they don't, I'll starve to death. That's what was culturally normal. Like, if you can make me clean, all that will change for me. And then pay close attention to the beginning of verse 3. Someone read that out loud.
Jesus stretched out his hand.
Okay, stop there. What did he do?
Stretched out his hand.
What do you not do with a leper?
Stretch out your hand.
Yeah. Before he said anything, the first thing he did is the thing you're not supposed to do. I tied this back in to our earlier conversation. Who am I? Stare at him. Listen to his voice. Ask, seek, knock. Listen. Stare at him. Listen. But I'm a leper. What does Jesus do with lepers? He reaches out his hand. Like, stare at him. And then a super cool sermon by Jesus. I'm willing. Be cleansed. I'm willing, be cleansed. And he was. And then Jesus does the worst advertising decision possible. Don't tell anyone, he says to the guy. Just show yourself to the priest. Help them to see that you no longer need to be treated like an outcast. Then a centurion comes up to him, an outsider. And he says, I've got a servant who's paralyzed. Jesus said, okay, I'll come and heal him. That's pretty cool. But the centurion man, I'm not worthy for you to come into my home. But I understand authority. And so I can tell people to do things lowercase. You can tell people to do things uppercase. It said, Jesus heard this. He marveled. That's what I mean. I don't care who sees it, but I want to live in a way that Jesus looks and says, like, man, Daniel, I really like that about you. Truly I say to you, I have not found such great faith with anyone in Israel. I say to you that many will come from east and west and recline at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the sons of the kingdom will be cast out into outer darkness. In the place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And Jesus said to the centurion, go, it shall be done for you as you have believed. And then Peter's mother-in-law is sick. Jesus heals her. Again, and this is what Old Testament said he'd do. He himself took our infirmities and carried away our diseases. This is what was prophesied of. This is what Jesus lived as he was here. And this is what he called his church to walk into, because he did it. It's what he came for. And then people see what Jesus is doing. And there's a call. You know, Jordan, as you said, there's a call to those lost friends that they could come. But there's always excuses. What's Ravenhill's quote? It's not that the gospel has been found wanting. It's that people have seen the gospel, found it difficult. And what? Yeah, say it real loud.
Christianity hasn't been tried and found wanting. It's been tried, found difficult, and rejected.
Yes. And that's this. Lord, permit me first. Let me just practical things. Let me just take care of some practical things. That's a foundation. That's a kingdom. That's a perspective. That's a step. It's other. Even in the extreme. And then they get in a boat. And there's a storm. And Jesus forgot to worry about the storm. I like to tease Teresa. When we were early in our marriage, she used to come to me with stuff going on in our life. And she'd be like, Dan, you forgot to worry about this. Like, Teresa, I didn't forget to worry. You're not supposed to worry. So the disciples came to him. You forgot to worry. Well, why aren't you afraid? You're supposed to be afraid. And so Jesus said to them, why are you afraid? Where's your faith? And then he got up and rebuked wind and sea. So, just an honest moment here. I think sometimes I wrestle with, and maybe you're with me in some of this, that rebuking like thoughts or feelings. Jesus rebuked storms and sea. There's more. There's more. Then Jesus casts out a demon, the guy who's filled with legion. It's kind of interesting, this pattern of Jesus with this guy. They identify themselves as legion, for we're many. And what business do we have with each other, Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time? And then they asked if they could be sent into the pigs, and Jesus allowed them to be cast into the pigs, and then the pigs freak out and jump in the water, and they died. And so the pigs that they wanted to live in ended up dying, and they lost what they wanted. And that got the attention of the city. Imagine that. And when they came out, if you can imagine a guy in your city who everyone is afraid of. Everyone knows there's something horribly wrong. This person comes, and that person who was famous or infamous for being scary and messed up is now great. What's the natural response to that happening? Could you please do more? But what do? They beg him to leave. Yeah, some people see, some people have seen, and still happens now, mighty works of God. But they want him to leave. It's scary. Let's jump to chapter 11. John the Baptist, he's imprisoned. His life is coming to an end soon. And he sends a message to Jesus through his disciples, through John's disciples, asking the question, are you the expected one? Are you the Messiah? Or should we be looking for someone else? Pretty reasonable question when you're in prison for saying the expected one is on his way here and the expected one is here. And Jesus doesn't say, tell him, yes, you can trust me. Yes, I am. Jesus, because the whole point of, John is the Elijah that was spoken of, one who will come and say, prepare the way. There's one coming. But there was a whole bunch of other stuff said about this one coming. And so instead of Jesus answering John's question, he points to some of the other stuff that was said. I'm not saying this is how it's supposed to work, but I would love when I go to talk to a friend or meet another pastor and they say, hey, how's the church going? I want to say this. The blind receive sight. The lame walk. The lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. And blessed are those who are not offended at it. Those last two lines get skipped a lot when this is quoted. The gospel preached to the poor. Why do you suppose that's there? Why not just the gospel preached? Because as people apart from him, we've got a real problem with focusing on those that we think can help us.
Well, when we worked on contract for faith-based for the Juvenile Correction Center, nobody goes there. The kids will ask for a Buddhist. They want to learn about Buddhism. They want to learn about Islam. They want to learn about Mormonism. You can't get any of those leaders to come teach them or give them a resource or talk to them. The only people that came in were Christians from Christian churches.
Because those kids could offer nothing back to them.
Right? They didn't want them as a part of their religion, as a part of their church.
So that's the message that's sent back to John, which I imagine for John, that's a pretty dang great answer. And so as they're going away, Jesus sends testimony to John, and then he testifies of John. It's really interesting. There's a lot in this passage here, and if you go through and study it culturally and everything that's going on in that day, there's a lot more here than what we could easily understand. Even like the reed shaken in the wind, and those are references to rulers of the day. And but basically, the first part of this is: are you looking for a kind of leader that is wealthy and has a beautiful smile and big words and nice clothes? That right there is kind of an indictment on much of the American church, yeah? I'm not saying soft clothes and a nice house is a bad thing, but I'm just saying, what are you looking for? But what did you go out and see? Everybody knew who John was. He's the grasshopper guy. He eats locusts and honey. And he wears like just fur tied around his waist. Like,
Itchy fur.
yeah, I mean, camel fur is not. Have you ever rode on a camel before? Felt camel hair? Yeah, it is unpleasant. I mean, you're going out of your way. Like, what's the least comfortable thing I could wear? Porcupine skin. No, I could do better. You know.
It has to be smelly.
Yeah. And the point is, what were people hungry for? The real. Not an impressive person, but the reality of an impressive God. That's a good reminder for us as ministers of the gospel. We need more of him, not better ideas and better language. And so he basically affirms John the Baptist and the ministry that he did, who he was. And in verse 12, I mean, it's such a good verse, but from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent men take it by force. This is a fight. It's a spiritual fight. Yeah. And John came neither eating nor drinking. And what do people say about him? He has a demon. What do people say about Jesus? He has a demon. Man. Then the end of chapter 11, then he begins to speak against cities. Now, Jesus had done miracles. People had seen the power of God, and people asked him to leave. People rejected the message. He had come in his power and his love and his message, and people still said no. Woe to you. Woe to you. For if the miracles that had occurred in Tyre and Sidon, which occurred in you, he's basically saying, like, if Sodom and Gomorrah had seen the move of God that you had, they would have turned. And you saw it and you didn't. Powerful. It will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom in the day of judgment than it is for you. Dang. And then, again, come to me, he says. All you who are weary, heavy laden, I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. I'm gentle and humble in heart. You'll find rest for your soul. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. It's really interesting to me, the other, the blessed are, you know, it's him and his way. Don't judge other people. Just look at him. Look at him. Pay attention to him. Listen to what he's saying. Look at how he sees you. Don't judge others. Don't walk in, look at the great things. Believe me for the great things that I can do, but don't get fixed on those things. Like, that's not the point. You can say, Lord, Lord, and do these great miracles, but it's, where is your foundation really built? And from where is your foundation built? Watch what this looks like to be lived out. That you reach your hand out to lepers. That's what this looks like to be lived out. That you eyes open, ears open, you know, that the reality and miraculous work of God. So come to him, trust him. This beautiful message is spoken and presented and shared and lived, and we see people respond and we see people reject, and all of this leads to what it will always lead to, which is what we see in chapter 12, is the religious spirit's response. All of this happens. Jesus is passing through the grain field. They're grabbing little bits of grain as they're walking by and flicking them in their mouth as they eat them. You're not having a meal. You're just, you know what I mean? Like, you ever live somewhere where you can pick something and just eat it as you walk? Maybe hear like a blackberry bush or something. Like, that's basically what they're doing. And the religious go, ha! We caught you working on the Sabbath. what? Like that.
This is a wheat berry.
That's exactly what's happening.
It's not even good.
And so Jesus basically says, y'all are ridiculous. And then, more than this, he says, that Sabbath that you're protecting, I'm the Lord of that Sabbath. The Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. And then he says to them, look, you're hypocrites anyhow. If you've got an animal that falls, like, did you see that hilarious video that Andrew was showing everybody, the sheep that fell into the pit?
Dude. I didn't see it. You guys didn't see it.
Yeah, not now, but later, Cole, you can see it. But a sheep falls into a pit, you pull it out. It may jump back in, but you pull it out. It doesn't matter. Like, that's what, and even if it's the Sabbath, you guys are going to do that, right? He's saying, is that working? And so he's saying, look, even your argument is untrue. Your accusation is untrue. And so they're upset with his response, and they want to kill him. Jesus knows this. It wasn't time, so he leaves. And then a demon-possessed man who's blind and mute was brought to Jesus. Jesus heals him. He's no longer mute, and now he sees. I feel like that's something that everyone can be happy about, right? Not the religious. All the crowds were amazed. But then the religious said, this man casts out demons by the authority of the demonic. And Jesus ties this back into the original conversation. Where's your foundation? There's two kingdoms. There's him and his way, and then there's hell. There's him and his way, and then there's hell. Hell doesn't fight hell, and heaven doesn't fight heaven. It's heaven and hell. And then he warns, look, you can speak against me, but man, if you don't receive the Spirit and the Spirit's work, there's no other hope for you. And then he continues on the language of the fruit. Either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad, because the tree is known by its fruit. You brood of vipers, how can you, being evil, speak what is good? It's not as an accusation, but as a warning. Let's not allow the world to tell us what's good. Let's allow him. And even when a whole bunch of people in the world agree that what he said is bad, let's be okay with that. And let's just trust that he's right. Verse 37, for by your words you'll be justified, and by your words you'll be condemned. That's an underlinable, highlightable verse for sure. God's been challenging me that a lot of ways recently. And then it's interesting, the last part of chapter 12 here, he talks about, because he's done all these great signs, but there's some people that's what they're chasing. The signs are a sign to point to the validity of him. They're a message to say, this is the Son of God. But people started saying, cool, signs. And they missed the point. They missed what the sign was pointing to. And he says, you're an evil and adulterous generation. You're craving for a sign. No sign's going to be given to you. Pretty powerful. I want to read just a couple passages if I can. Verse 43, it says, now when the unclean spirit goes out of a man, it passes through waterless places seeking rest and does not find it. Then it says, I will return to my house from which I came. And when it comes, it finds it unoccupied, swept, and put in order. Then it goes and takes along with it 7 other spirits more wicked than itself, and they go in and they live there. And the last state of the man becomes worse than the first. That is the way that it'll always be with this evil generation. See, this is the thing. If what we're looking for is signs, in fact, signs without foundation, signs without new roots, signs without lordship, signs without relationship, signs without the person of Jesus, can make things worse than they were before. I love what Bill Johnson says, that a small amount of something builds up a immunity to it. For many people, they've dabbled in Christianity and they've become immune to the message. Jesus died on the cross and he loves me and he gave his life for me and I can lose my own life and I can find my new life. And it doesn't mean anything. They're just words now. Because they've dabbled so much that it doesn't mean anything. Signs alone are not the point. Yes, a person who is bound by the demonic should be set free. But if you just go, goodbye, you have condemned that person. It's not the signs. The signs point to the one. The signs help to point to the one. The signs are proof of the one. But we need him. We need signs, but we don't need signs like we need him. We need him. Signs point to him. And this is what happens when you try to take the one without the other, is you leave people worse off than they were before. The other example to this is if signs are about the sign steward, then like you're the point. If people come here and what they walk away from is that I'm the point, they will be very disappointed and they will not have what they need. They need Jesus. And so may God use every one of you in countless, uncountable, miraculous ways in Jesus' name. But may every time that he does, it be followed up with a message of, here's Christ. Receive Christ. He's the one who did this for you. He's the one that brought this word to you. He's the one who set you free. He's the one who changed your mind. He's the one that caused your eyes to be open. He's the one. Now receive him. Now that you've received this gift of freedom, of life, of healing from him, now receive him. I pray millions of signs come forth from the people in this house for the sake of our community and our world. But every time, for the sake of the gospel, for the sake that they could receive Christ, not so that a house could be empty, a show could be put on. Amen? And then the last piece, just powerful. People came and said, hey, your family's here. And Jesus said, man, who's my family? Those who do the will of my Father who's in heaven. Those are my brothers and sisters and mother. Pretty powerful stuff. Let's jump over to Luke. Most of this is duplication, but there's a couple of these that I want us to hit. We'll try to be done in like 10 minutes. Luke chapter 7. He goes to a city, starting in verse 12. He approached the city gate, and there was a funeral procession going on. And there was a young man who was going to be buried. And he was the only son of a woman, of a mother, and she was a widow. So a widow with no son is equal to a woman living in terrible poverty. So for her to lose her son means that she lost her livelihood, her home, her food, her income, her place in society, essentially. This is a big deal. Jesus sees this, and he says to her, don't weep. And then he touched the coffin. The people carrying the coffin stop. And he says to the young man, arise. The dead man sat up and began to speak. And Jesus took the dead man who was in a funeral procession that no one invited him to. And he said, hey, here's your mom. Like, that's Jesus. So again, the last verse, who's my mom? Who's my brothers? That's not Jesus being flippant about Mary, obviously. He's on the cross. One of the few things that he says is to John and his mom. His heart for moms and sons is not the problem. That's not the point. Powerful story, amen? The report goes out all around. Can you imagine going to a funeral? You're mourning the loss of your friend or, the guy that you work with, whatever. And some guy just walks up and touches the coffin. So everyone's like, hey, bro, party foul. You can't just walk up and touch. And then he says, get up. And then your friend gets up. What do you even do with that?
Come on.
It says they were all gripped with fear.
Right, yeah. I think that's the appropriate response. What the heck? Yeah, I wonder, lunch that day, your friend sitting next to you, do you want to sit by him? Or, are you
We got the catering already for your funeral.
Yeah, he's that big. He's that powerful. That's who he is. Then later on we see one of the best stories, I think, in Scripture. The woman comes in. She was a sinner. She was known to be a sinner, kind of like the guy who's known to be the demoniac in the cemetery. And when she learned that he was reclining at the table of a Pharisee's house, she brought an alabaster vial of perfume. And standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears and kept wiping them with her hair of her head and kissing his feet and anointing them with perfume. Alabaster vial of perfume is extremely expensive. She wastes it all on his feet. Feet are super gross in this culture. I mean, they're gross today, but they're super gross there. What's the glory of a woman? Her hair. What is she washing his feet with? What's the last thing in the world you want to do with a foot? Kiss it. She wastes all the perfume. She's washing his feet with her glory, with her hair. And she's kissing his feet. What is this woman showing? Your kingdom come. Where's her foundation? In him. Because where is this happening? Where is this taking place? In a Pharisee's home. Where's the last place a sinner wants to be? In a religious leader's home. Where's the last place a sinner should be doing something so extravagant for Jesus? In a religious person's home. I think it's fair to say she was not gripped by the fear of man. She was gripped by the love of Jesus. The goodness of Jesus. And the religious person, see, this is why it's important for us to be careful and to continually ask God, search me, Lord, is there any religious spirit? Is there any religious agreement? Is there any religious perspective in me? Because I want none. Because this religious leader is sitting in the room as one of the greatest stories in Scripture takes place. One of the most profound acts of worship in human history is taking place, and he's offended and he thinks there's something wrong with Jesus. If he was really a prophet, he'd know who she is. And he wouldn't let her do what she's doing. A religious spirit in us causes us to misinterpret Jesus, causes us to misinterpret acts of worship, and it causes us to miss the goodness and the works of God in other people. It does nothing but rob and twist and pervert what could be a blessing and a help to us. And so Jesus tells a little story.
Have something to say.
Yeah, I mean,
His thoughts.
so this is what's happening. Jesus is reclined at a table. His feet are to his side. She's behind him, leaning over, washing his feet with tears, perfume, and her hair. And this guy across is silently judging Jesus. Then Jesus said, hey, let me tell you a parable. Let me tell you a story, which Jesus often does. And the Pharisee's like, oh, cool, teaching. That's what I'm here for, right? And he says, a moneylender has two debtors. One owed 500, the other 50. When they were unable to repay him, he forgave both. Which one will love him more? And he's like, ooh, math, I'm good at this. 500. Jesus goes, good job. You did it. Why? Because he was forgiven more. Those who are forgiven much love much. And then he kind of points over to the woman washing his feet. And now the Pharisee gets it. It's not about how great we see ourselves. It's understanding what we've been given. And then Jesus kind of continues on. You see, this woman, I entered your house. You gave me no water for my feet. That was customary. He didn't. Why? Probably because he had some skeptical ideas of who Jesus was. But she's wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You gave me no kiss, customary. But why didn't he? But since the time I came in, she has not ceased to kiss my feet. You did not anoint my head with oil, customary. But she's anointed my feet with perfume. For this reason I say to you, her sins, which are many, have been forgiven. For she loved much, but he who is forgiven little loves little. But here's the crazy part. There is no such person who's been forgiven little. That's about perspective. I think I need to be forgiven of little. There is no person who's forgiven of little. Pretty crazy. Luke chapter 8, parable of the sower. You know what? Let's be done here. We'll continue that next time. We're at 11:20, and I don't want to lose steam and try to cover too much. So we'll start with Luke 8. And I'll email you guys what we're going to go through, because I need to move some stuff around so that it's an appropriate amount of reading for this, not next week, because almost all of you will be in Idaho next week. So we won't have this, but we'll get started the week after. So thanks, guys. Any last thoughts to share or anything before we're done for today?